This ain't my first rodeo. Read.
He has not responded to the divine simplicity criticism. No, I don't think that he did. Do you have any response to the criticism I made of the fact that if God's unicity is an absolute, viewed in an absolute sense, that his act of creating the world is also synonymous with his essence, which is eternal, that would mean that creation is eternal?
No, I don't follow the logic of that at all. God in Islam is someone who is absolute. He's the eternal, uncaused cause of all that is, the universe, the space-time continuum, etc. He is eternally the creator. He's eternally loving. He's eternally, all his attributes are eternal.
Is he's eternally the creator?
Yes, of course. God doesn't, unlike in Christianity where God changes, he becomes a man, he dies, and so on. God, being eternal, does not change. He's always, it doesn't mean he's always creating, but he's always the creator. And obviously the creation. How is
he a creator if he's not always creating?
Because he has the attributes of being a creator. That's what it means. That's what the word creator means. He has the attributes of being a creator.
How is he an eternal creator when he wasn't creating?
He's always creating, any more than he has the attribute of glory and love and compassion, that he is always in our space-time sense, doing those things.
Yeah, but this is different because if he's he's eternally creator, then what's he a creator of eternally?
Well, this
is why the attributes break down, and in your view, they're meaningless.
The universe is contingent. It's not necessary.
Yeah, that's not an answer. That's not what I asked you.
Well, it's my answer. You may not like it. It's my answer, and therefore there was a time when the universe didn't exist. Now God didn't.
So then God's not always creator.
God didn't change and become something he wasn't before, because God is perfect.
Then he's an eternal creator.
But in Christianity,
you just refuted yourself.
What we're dealing with here, we're dealing with a religion about Jesus. Christianity is a religion about Jesus. Islam actually calls people back to the religion of Jesus.
It's false.
And that's a crucial distinction. Islam is a call back to people not to worship Jesus, but to follow the religion of Jesus. And there's a wonderful hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad, peace be upon him, said to people, do not exaggerate in praising me as the Christians have exaggerated in praising Jesus, son of Mary, for I am only a servant. So say, he is the servant of Allah and his messenger. That's a hadith in Al-Bukhari. So Muhammad taught us that to be very aware not to do to him what Christians have done to Jesus. They have made him into a deity. And the Quran has some very strong things to say about that.
The thing that I'd like to say is that the reason that I didn't address those texts was not trying to avoid them, but rather I was working through my list of things I wrote down as you were talking. So about the text where Christ says that he still has a God, it may be a surprise to you. Maybe I think you came from a Roman Catholic background, but in Orthodox theology, we are very insistent on the fact that the Father is the source and fountain of the Godhead. And that will always be the case. And in fact, that's consistent in the text where Jesus says that he came to do the will of the Father. And then later on, when Paul writes and says that Christ is, that the Father is the head of Christ, just as the man is the head of the wife. It's the same application, the same principle. When Jesus says that none is good but God, and namely the Father, he also in other places refers to himself as good. He tells the woman at the well that he is the one who was to come. She says, sir, who is this Messiah that's to come? Who is this one who's going to bring this water of living waters flowing out of him? And he says, I am he. You are speaking to him. Now, you did the exact same thing that I said you would do, which was that your ultimate source of authority and what you ultimately appealed to was the arbitrary scholars that you chose. So your rationale is not based on the internal consistency of the text, but on the presupposition of unbelief appealing to authority. So in other words, both of us are appealing to authority, right? You said that I was doing eisegesis by reading into the text what I wanted to see there. But in fact, every human being, as I just said, is going to in some way read their worldview and their presuppositions into the text. You confirmed that by the fact that you relied on Raymond Brown and the fact that you went to whatever school and you studied biblical scholarship. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the majority of biblical scholarship in our day is unbelieving. That's not going to be an argument. That's not going to be a source by which you can prove any kind of argument. You can bring that forth to as a way to kind of have an attestation. You know, I might cite Josephus or something like this as a confirmation of something that I would argue. But to appeal to Raymond Brown or to appeal to any of the numerous higher critical schools, again, going all the way back to Julius Wellhausen, the founder of modern higher criticism, isn't it interesting that the document or hypothesis was born out of an admitted desire to destroy the text? So you're appealing to the textual tradition of higher criticism, which was intended, its whole intention was to destroy not the New Testament, but Moses, the Torah, the very thing that you at times think is true. So it's completely arbitrary when you say that you want to go back to and reconstruct the original religion of Jesus. You don't know what that is because it's completely arbitrary. It's ad hoc, and you can appeal to any manner of unbelieving scholars all day, but all that does is show the inadequacy of your position. Because if I were to come out here and just start appealing to the top Islamic scholars and this liberal scholar, and that is Karen Armstrong, or any scholar who has a liberal perspective, you would immediately say that that's probably not an authentic reading of Islam, or if we were to appeal to the different divisions. So there's multiple fallacies at work in the arguments that you're making. Again, only Orthodoxy has the strict view that the Father is the source and fount of Godhead, who communicates that deity through the Son to the Spirit. So the triune God is not something that we invented. Again, I give you a list of theophanies. I give you a list of things in the Old Testament where the angel of the Lord, which angel just means a messenger, is literally worshipped. Now, again, Judaism, Christianity, we all agree that we cannot worship creatures. Yet these theophanies are worshipped, and they're not identical to the Father, as Exodus 3 and 22:23 makes clear with the angel of the Lord. God says, I will put my name, Yahweh, into that angel, right? He has that full divine authority, and he goes before in the fire and the cloud in the Exodus to cleanse the promised land. So guess what? It was Jesus, the Logos, that cleansed the promised land. Because all throughout the New Testament, it's made consistently and abundantly clear. Now, you can pick out certain texts where you think that, well, it's not Jesus there because Jesus says that he submits to the Father. That's just assuming that the Trinity isn't true. So I could appeal to all kinds of texts and find all kinds of things that, if I don't have a holistic perspective of the Bible, I think might grant me or give me a justification. But this has already been settled and dealt with. I mean, all you're giving is kind of classical Arian arguments that St. Athanasius, St. Basil, others dealt with extensively. So obviously I can't go into all that in 8 minutes, but when we say that there's one good, he is God, that doesn't exclude the possibility of there also being a multiplicity in God. Because guess what? Although you may think that you have a perfectly unitive view of God, you actually don't, because the same problems that occur in what you perceive us to have in terms of multiplicity, you have those same problems. I know you think you don't, but in fact, if you believe that the actions of God in creating the world are identical to the unity or the essence of God, or God's nature, whatever you want to call it, whatever terms you guys use, then you have to also affirm that that action is just as eternal as the essence. It's synonymous as the divine essence. And this is what St. Athanasius refuted the Arians on the basis of. He says that when you guys identify God's will with the divine essence, which is exactly what you do in your theology, because you don't have any distinctions in God, because you have the presupposition that distinction must mean composition or division, and it must therefore mean a denial of the true unity of God. Okay, well, let's go down that road. If there is no allowance for any sense of multiplicity in the divine, then not only does the act of creation become an eternal action, and creation then becomes just as eternal as God, you have pantheism. You could also flip it on the other side and say, well, then God willed to create out of his essence, and he has no relationship to the created order because he's nothing like the created order. But you see, the very thing that we say about the incarnation when it comes to Jesus and how he can become incarnate and speak to us and move and operate in this world in the sense of being the second person of the Godhead, taking on impersonal human nature, you have that same problem with relating this perfectly unified deity to the created here and now, you see. How does the Quran perfectly exemplify this eternal, abstract, beyond deity that does not in any way have created forms, likenesses, or analogies? How does he do that? How can there be a Quran that really tells us truths about God if you do not allow for any distinctions or any conceptual analogies, because guess what? Conceptual analogies or written analogies are no different than iconographic depictions. So it doesn't matter whether it's an icon on a wall that says the name Allah, or whether it's a book that says the name Allah and the supposed words of Allah, or whether in our view it's an iconographic representation of Christ, an icon of Christ, or whether it's Christ in his human nature walking around and talking. All of these are the exact same issue, and you haven't actually escaped this issue by simply saying that, well, God is perfectly unitive in a radical way, and you guys are heretics because you have the notion of multiplicity in the Godhead. I would just again emphasize, if God is absolutely identical to his essence in every way, in every sense, then creation is an eternal action, and you actually believe creation is eternal.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه.
Before time began, there was the cube. We know not where it comes from, only that it holds the power to create worlds.